The biggest story in the Premier League today is that Manchester City have been hit with 115 financial fair play charges. I'm delighted to say Martin Lipton is with us to talk to us about this. Martin, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. I think you'll probably get more sense out of Pat Nevin than you will from me, but nevertheless, I'll do my best.
I don't know. Your back page story on The Sun this morning is boot them out. Prem rivals want champs relegated for cash tricks. The trouble here for Manchester City is that they might be able to take on the Premier League with their lawyers, but all of a sudden, all of the other clubs in the Premier League now have grounds for cases against Manchester City, and so they might have some victories along the way in terms of the 115 that might get reduced. But at some point, surely the rest of the Premier League are looking at this and going, hang on a second, what's the point of rules if somebody's allowed to break them?
I think you've got to be difficult and diverse because actually, bizarrely as it sounds, under Premier League rules, a third-party club cannot appeal or complain about a decision made by a Premier League panel. Only the clubs involved can. So they would have to go to law, literally try and make a high court suit for damages. Now, that's very hard to sustain. However, that would be different depending on the punishment. So let's have a look at the totality here. City face 115 separate allegations of breaches of the regulation, which they absolutely deny emphatically, totally, utterly, completely. We did nothing wrong, Gov. It's a conspiracy. Don't look at us. Look over there. That's their right to so do. The obvious punishment would be a fine if they're found guilty of these. But that won't be enough, I don't think, for anybody, given the scale of the alleged breaches over 10 years. And then I think more damagingly for City, 4 years of obstruction of the inquiry, which is what they have been charged with. The last 5 charges are season by season not giving full information to the Premier League. So a fine would probably be seen as insufficient. So the next step up would be a transfer embargo. That would be possible. Difficult to sustain because there's a question there of whether they have the legitimacy to do that, but that's the Premier League. They can do as they see fit. This panel has any punishment at its disposal. Next up, points deduction. If you deduct points over multitude of seasons, that's a real problem, actually. If you were to say for each season when the offences took place, that's every season from 2008-9, we're going to deduct 3 points. In 8 of those seasons, Manchester City lose a place. In 4 of them, they lose the title. And in 1 of them, they lose a Champions League place. All the clubs that have been displaced could then theoretically sue City or the Premier League if they didn't order City to pay a compensation payment. So if you're Man United, we would have been more marketable in 2013, 2012 if we won the title. So where's our, you owe us for that. And in 2015-16, we lost £40 million when we would have finished above you in 4th place in the title race and therefore gone into the Champions League. That's a real nest of vipers for the Premier League. So in many ways, it would be simpler for there to be one punishment of relegation stroke expulsion for next season or the season after.
That seems like a bombshell in a way. If you're Man City, I guess you say, okay, we'll pay 40 million compensation to Manchester United. Not going to give Liverpool the title the time that they might have won it. Not going to give Man United the title. I don't know. What do you do if you're City in this instance, assuming that they get found guilty, right? Let's just
but they could be cleared.
Yeah.
They won their case against UEFA, albeit they won. The main reason they beat UEFA is because UEFA actually laid the charges too late. They were after the time barrier. There is no time bar for Premier League charges. Interestingly, City is saying that's really good for us. We're really pleased that there's no time bar, because it means we can be completely cleared and exonerated, and this is the end of this. I would like to buy that if they hadn't used the time bar as their main defence against UEFA, but there you go.
Very interesting situation. All the lawyers are going to get very rich out of this on all of the sides, because I'm sure all the clubs are looking at to see exactly what they might be due if City were to be found guilty. But so there's 2 outcomes really. There's a bunch of other outcomes that are possible, but the main ones are City get found innocent, City get found guilty. If they do get found guilty, would it be in their interest to take relegation for one season and think, well, we'll come back automatically, just keep everybody for that one season, take whatever the costs are, take your parachute payments. Do you get your parachute payments if you've been kicked out? How does that all work?
I think you would get parachute payments. That's 40 million. Think about this. If City are relegated for one season, that means they're not in Europe for 3 seasons. Because they wouldn't be in Europe the season after they were relegated. They wouldn't be in the Champions League the season after that because they wouldn't be able to qualify for it. So it would be 3 seasons before they could qualify for Europe. TV income from a decent season in the Champions League, plus City finishing top 4 every year, around £270 million. So in season 1, they get 50 million from TV money. There's a 220 million black hole. Season 2, the maximum they get is 140 million because they're not in Europe. So that's another 130 million black hole. You've suddenly lost an awful lot of money. And even the season, if they qualify, they have to then sell players to meet the salary demands. A lot of them will go anyhow. Yeah. Are you going to tell Erling Haaland that no, you're not going to be playing PSG next season. You're playing Hull City away on a Wednesday night, 46-game season. Are you going to tell Kevin De Bruyne, sorry, mate, Cardiff next Tuesday? Are you going to tell Ederson, I know you came here to play against Liverpool and United, but for the next 12 months, it's going to be a bit different. We've got Huddersfield. Fancy that, don't you? It's just not viable, is it? They're not going to stay. The players will leave. They'll be able to buy players. They'll have a huge sum of money. But a lot of these players are on long-term contracts. They'll lose money on them. They'll lose money. So their FFP position gets worse because they haven't got the income stream for 3 years. The players they sell, because they're a distressed seller, will go for less than they should do. Many of them are on long contracts with them. Even if those fees have been amortized, you've still got to pay off the overhang of the amortization before you can start to bank the sales. It's a real issue.
So they will fight that then, obviously. I mean, we know
they would fight a 50p fine. And they've every right to. Let's be honest, they've every right to. They would fight a 50p fine. That's Manchester City.
When I first saw the charges over the weekend, Martin, immediately you think, well, because of the Court of Arbitration for Sport decision a couple of years ago, it's going to be the same outcome. But then, as you say, you talk about the fact that there's no time bar in this one. They found more evidence as well, and they have more evidence than the previous incident a couple of years ago. It feels different, this one. It feels like a more weighted argument against City.
I think what will prove to be potentially the most serious charges are the last 5 charges. The obstruction of the inquiry charge. If you go back to Carlos Tevez in 2006, the reason that they should, according to the Commission, have been given a penalty, a points deduction, and they weren't for different reasons, but the reason that they should have been given a points deduction wasn't the offence of Tevez. It was the lies Scott Duxbury and others at West Ham, no longer at West Ham, let's point that out, told to the Premier League, directly to Richard Scudamore. That was seen as the most egregious situation. Now, the allegation here is that over 5 consecutive seasons, including this season, Manchester City have deliberately attempted to obstruct and deflect and prevent a full and proper inquiry. That's quite serious, and that is where they could be in significant trouble, I think. If they just fessed up and said, yeah, we did, a fine and a small points deduction might have been the most likely scenario. At this stage, I genuinely don't know what will happen because nobody does. It's entirely in the hands of the 3-person committee to be perhaps headed by Murray Rosen QC, certainly selected by him. He's the head of the chair of the judicial panel. Nobody knows what they'll do. The Premier League have no idea. The Premier League have no say in this outcome. These are 3 independent people, one of whom must be, the chair must be a senior lawyer. City have actually the right to complain and to argue against the inclusion of any members of that panel if they feel they have vested interests. So they can't claim that they didn't have a fair hearing. It's going to be really, really fascinating. And it will be entirely at the decision and behest of this panel what happens next. The Premier League can ask for certain punishment, but they can't impose it. All their Premier League will do is impose the punishment that is set by the Commission.
What do you make of the timing of all this, Martin? Because you look, we're just coming out of a transfer window where the Premier League have received a lot of flack and criticism across Europe for the amount of spending. I think Chelsea outspent every other team in Europe's top 5 leagues put together. £815 million sterling spent by all the clubs in the Premier League. Like, is it a response to criticism, to be seen to be getting ahead of issues like this and dealing with financial irregularities or alleged financial irregularities?
No, because the Premier League is utterly proud of what it is. There's no one at the Premier League who thinks that the spending of the Premier League is a mark of shame. They think it's a mark of strength. They love the fact that Premier League is becoming the go-to destination in world football, that it's the only league that has emerged full bore from the pandemic. It's a genuine source of pride to the Premier League that basically we run our business so well. We are so popular globally and we are so strong reputationally that everyone wants to come here, and we are number one without question. In fact, we're so far number one that we can't even see number two in our back, out of our back rearview mirror. That's how, and they're genuinely, innately, inordinately, but understandably, I think, proud of what they've achieved. This is nothing to do with that at all. This is an ongoing investigation which began in December 18 and has finally come to a position where the board, and that's Richard Masters and his colleagues, agreed that it was sufficient evidence that a charge should be laid.
It's so serious that you feel like it has the possibility to impact the team's performances over the rest of the season, because as you make the point, like, if relegation is a possibility, the vast majority of those players will not play in the Championship, and they will talk about this, like in the WhatsApp groups, in the City first team, in the little cliques. They're all chatting about, well, what are you going to do if we get relegated? Well, I've already talked to my agent and I've got 4 clauses that are going to allow it. So like this, it's such a big story, it's difficult to overstate.
Look, we don't know what the impact will be. City didn't seem to be terribly adversely affected by the Champions League ban. In that their season was, it was in the February of 2020, and they that season, let's be honest, was already gone because Liverpool won the league. It was done and dusted before the chaos of COVID. So City still played. This weren't as good that season. It didn't stop them going deep in the Champions League, and they'd already gone deep in the Champions League. They were into the quarterfinals effectively after the ban, but before the ban was overturned. But this is different in scale because of the sheer number of charges. I'm sure the City players have been, will be, and continue to be told, do not worry, this is all a put-up job. We've got nothing to fear. We told you before, look, we were right. We're telling you now, we'll be right. And guess what? City may be correct in that. They may well be correct in that. I'm not. Let's put it this way. They've got the best lawyers on the planet. They can afford to hire the best lawyers there are. They will work absolutely hammer and tong to ensure that their case is victorious. But you're right. It will, you would have thought, have a detrimental impact. The question is how detrimental an impact. If you're a City player now and you think the best scenario is that we're going to be deducted points, because we're probably, those players will know, some of them, that if they had a second contract in breach of league regulations. There are players at the club in the squad now who will know if these charges about the contracts that they had are correct. If they're correct, and I do not know, if they are correct and they know that, they'll tell the other players that. And they'll know, actually, well, there's something in this. Oh, right. You would have thought, with the possibility of losing even, 15 points, whatever it might be this season, do they really want to care about beating Arsenal twice? Or do they say, we make now go and win every single point so that when and if they take points off us, everyone knows we were the real champions. We were the team that really won the Champions League, etc. It could work the other way.
The script writers for this season are working overtime. What was already a brilliant, interesting title race at the top, and the relegation and sack race at the bottom has suddenly been, catapulted into all-time great storytelling. It's incredible that this has happened at this stage of the season. That the story has come out, that the legal documents were delivered the way they were, and that now we all know chapter and verse and the details as well. It's I don't know what's going to happen.
We did know the detail. We know some of the details. You don't know all of them. That's the issue. And the one thing that's a real shame is that this hearing will be held in private, although the chairman of the panel has the right to determine that it is taken down verbatim and published. And I truly, truly hope that happens, given that we're not allowed in. I suspect what we'll get is a summary rather than a full hearing transcript, but I'd love to get a transcript.
Last thing, what's the time frame here? When do you think we actually might know the makeup of the judiciary panel and how long it will take to hear the case?
Well, the makeup of the panel should be quite easy. You know, Murray Rosen just chooses 3 from the list he's got. He could do that within the next 17 days. City have got, this is going to sound ridiculous, City were charged yesterday. They would have got the email. They've read it on the website, but legally they haven't received the letter until Thursday, informing them of their charge, because it has to be sent by registered mail. Don't ask me why, but it does. So they don't get it, even though they got it, until Thursday. They then have 2 weeks, which takes us to the 23rd of February to respond, after which the Premier League has another 2 weeks to respond. In that period, the panel should be selected. So that gives you March 9. Theoretically, it could be any time from then. Certainly by the end of March. And if you want it to be concluded by early summer, which is benefits of clarity for everyone, you probably want to hold this hearing by early April to get a result by, within a couple of days, and then start the appeal process, which would initially be an appeal to another panel by whichever party wanted to so do.
Right.
However, it could drag on for months. It all depends on lawyers agreeing when they should hold the hearing. And if you're City's lawyer, you will say, well, we need more time to defend ourselves, and we haven't had this paper, and we've not had that paper, and we've been delayed on this, and they will drag. It will make sense for them to drag it as far as they can. And if it goes into next season, then it adds more layers of problems, because were there then to be an eventual decision of a relegation, what does a team that comes 18th this season do?
Takes a case.
When they wouldn't have been relegated this season, if the punishment had been imposed then. It's a real problem.
Yeah. Martin, great stuff. Thanks a million for making the time for us this morning. Really
Thanks.
Appreciate it. It's Martin Lipton there from The Sun, giving us the latest on the situation at Manchester City.